everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. All right, today's discussion is titled Hinduphobia in Canada. And to talk about it with me is Dr. Ragini Sharma. Ragini ji, welcome. Thanks a lot for coming.
Namaste.
All right. So, Ragini ji, before we start the discussion, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was born in India and I've lived in Canada for over 40 years with my husband, and I have two daughters, Kalpana and Anita. Hello. And two grandchildren. And my work life has been as a social worker and just working in the mainstream community, in child welfare, in housing. So, you know, that's my background. And in 2016, I completed my PhD in the area of yoga. And since then, I've been a full-time seva warrior for Hindu Dharma.
All right. All right. Awesome. Awesome. Good to hear that. So, Ragini ji, maybe we'll start with this. Now, obviously, we are going to cover a lot of topics today, which today's discussion is not going to be narrowed down to the recent attack on the Swaminarayan temple, which is BAPS Toronto. But we're going to cover a lot of issues that the Hindu community faces in Canada. But I'm going to start with the BAPS incident itself. So before somebody says what happened, maybe they were living under the a cave or something. So I can explain to them. So recently, what happened was there was an incident in Toronto where outside the Swaminarayan Mandir, Swaminarayan is one of the sampradayas of the Hindu community, and the Baps Mandir was vandalized. Basically, outside the temple, there were specific slogans that were written. Uh, there was on one side of the gate there was Hindustan that was spray painted, and then on the other side of the gate there was Murdabad that was spray painted, and um, and then in the central part of the same gate there was written Khalistan Zindabad, and this is just one of the cases, and why I'm starting with this is that this is emblematic of the kind of challenges the Hindu community faces in Canada, and this was and just so that my viewers benefit from what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to share a couple of images so that they know what I'm talking about. So this is the Khalistan Zindabad, as you see on your screen, that was spray painted on the Baps Toronto Mandir, and this is the Murdabad. This is a direct shot of the video outside the Baps Shri Swami Narayan Toronto, Canada Mandir. And this is kind of, as they would say, a trend now when it comes to, you know, attacks on the Hindu community centers, or sometimes it was going to be a Gandhiji statue that gets vandalized. Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's something else. So maybe we can start with this, Ragini ji. So now you obviously started a petition, right? And your petition, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen too because it is directly after what happened over here. So this petition was about hate crimes against Hindus on the rise in Canada, and you talk about many other issues in this petition itself. So now I'm going to hand it over to you, and maybe you can explain everything to us.
Oh, thank you, Kushal, for bringing this topic to the audience, because we live in Canada, and overall it's such a safe and beautiful country to live in. But and Hindus are, we're very relaxed people. We don't want to make waves. We want to do our job, get our kids to university, become doctors, lawyers, and we avoid talking about this kind of issue. But there comes a point where things like this happen, where we just can't bear it any longer. And you will see even today, the Swaminarayan temple, people have their Twitter post was about peace. Let's keep the peace. And that's what has been the tradition of Hindus. We're not complainers. We're just, workers and taxpayers, and making the country a better place for everyone. So this issue happened. The reason it hurt us deeply is because the Swaminarayan temple is an iconic temple. All temples belong to all of us. They are all our precious places to us, to our hearts. But this temple is a very iconic temple. There have been blood donation during, I think during the COVID, there were injection sites where people could go for vaccination. Their whole community is such a devoted and community devoted to service. And to have this kind of intrusion on that space has been very traumatic. I know someone who is a very senior volunteer there, and I had sent a private message. And the word she wrote back to me that we are devastated. So, this really hurt us deep. And also because this is sort of a tipping point after the last year or two has been many, many incidents of Hinduphobia. Did you want me to mention a few?
Please do,
Yeah,
please do.
yeah. Um, well, I think I'd like to start with the farmers. I think that's how I got involved a lot into this discussion. The farmers protest. Do you remember that? Yeah, and we had a rally. The community organized a rally in support of farmers and in India, and they were attacked. They were physically attacked. Altercation. The police, this is one of the issues. The police has not done anything, and that's one of our continued concerns. Is the police and the politicians are playing politics and avoiding naming the elephant in the room, which is Hinduphobia. So that happened. The farmers' protest happened. During that farmers' protest, the time that I got involved was that I work with school boards. I'm an academic. I want to do education because I think education can bring change, and through education we can address these things in a calm manner. And so when the community heard, and we were doing research on what's happening, and parents were coming forward and telling us that in their classrooms with children who are in grade 3 and 4, there were teachers coming in with material that was inappropriate. So they were basically there were lesson plans in which it was mentioned things like, oh, India is a banana republic. It's Modi is a fanatic. He's killing off the minorities. And, it became the atmosphere where children, parents made a petition that this kind of material was emotionally and psychologically affecting the children. So in the classroom, because of COVID, you're having online class, and another child is announcing publicly that Modi should die, or making anti-Hindu comments, and that the kids were crying. Our kids were crying that they felt very uncomfortable. They called their mommy, look what's happening. So the parents, we did a petition about that. So we became, and then I think you remember, I think we began to educate the school boards, that the petition was used to educate the school boards that, listen, we cannot bring this kind of language into the classroom. You know how it is, this Rajiv Malhotra's new book talks about the increase in wokeism. Wokeism has entered the school system under
Hmm.
the name of social justice education. You have kids walking around the neighborhood carrying, placards these days, and they're being brainwashed. And innocent children are being brainwashed to hate Hindus. And that's really problematic when it reaches our children and their self-esteem, who they are, the identity is attacked. We can't stand back and let that happen. So we have been doing a public education campaign that, those kinds of politics, there's two sides to the politics. The farmers protest, we're not here to discuss that, but we know there was two sides to it, and how it was projected in India was, for an ulterior motive. So we said, yes, you should be free to discuss any topic, but do you also discuss many other things that are happening across the world. We know against other traditions, but nobody talks about that. The targeting of Hindus and India, this is academic Hinduphobia is not something new. This has been going on, and Rajiv ji talked about. Many others have talked about it. This is not something new. So we have started to address it at the school board. And then after that, as you know, there were, attacks on Hindu temples. There were 20 plus, 20, some say it's 27 incidents where Hindu temples were attacked. And, what hurt me the most were video images of people wearing shoes, climbing on to the, to the mandaps and, where the altars were, snatching jewelry from the deities' ears, and the jewelry from the neck, and walking around, and there were holes made in the walls, and there was damage to the property. And the worst part of it was that the police, the politicians, they all just called it vandalism. This is such a disgrace. This is, this is not excusable at all. The Hindus community cannot accept calling such instance. We know that even a little window being broken with a stone or any, little graffiti is called suspected, whatever, religious against some religion. But when it comes to Hindus, they've got their blinders on. The elephant in the room is not being recognized. So I think our efforts is to hold the government, the police accountable. Like, they've assigned one person to investigate this incident at Swaminarayan Mandir. One constable in the little Twitter. Where's the public outrage against this? I mean, this is a temple that Justin Trudeau went to inaugurate it and been there. And this is the cowardice, I might call it, the cowardice and the hypocrisy of the government and the police. So we've had these temple break-ins, hardly any, arrests. I think there was some arrests, but there's not been the public recognition. There was the similar graffiti on Mahatma Gandhi's statue at Vishnu Mandir. And then there have been personal attacks. There was, I think, Deepak Punj, he's a broadcaster, and he was attacked by two goons and wearing masks. And this was after he confronted the mayor of Brampton about a public session he did on Khalistan, or supporting Khalistani, some event. So then I think just yesterday there was Raman Vasudevan. He's standing for city councillor, I believe, and
Yeah,
he
in
was probably,
Brampton.
yes, and he was attacked. And I think that for me, these are open incidents. For me, my concern as an academic is the generalized anti-Hindu sentiment that is being cultivated by the media and the academia. There was an instance where there was a speaker, a French journalist, I forget his name. He was invited by the Toronto Public Library to give a talk on anti-Modi. The whole talk was an anti-India. And we confronted the Toronto Public Library just as citizens. I said, listen, we're paying the taxes, and you're inviting this guy. And the Monk School at University of Toronto, regularly they're having talks. And then there's this Noor Cultural Center. 2 years ago, they had a talk. They invited some very rabid Hindu haters that are in the academia in Toronto to give talks on how toxic Hinduism is and India is. So there is to use Rajiv ji's new book, Snakes in the Ganga, right here in Canada. We have snakes in the Ganga right here in Canada. Okay, so we as a community are deeply pained, and we're working together. We have made some gains. I think a lot of work is happening in the background, but we have far to go, and I can talk a little bit more about the work I've done with school boards.
Yeah, so I want to get on the school boards, but before we get on to that, I just want to talk about the responses from the different sides of the spectrum in this, BAPS Toronto attack because I find it fascinating. So here's Patrick Brown. For people who don't know who Patrick Brown is, yaar, jaake Google kar dena. So Patrick Brown says, very disappointed to hear of the vandalism that occurred at the BAPS Swaminarayan Mandir in Toronto. This type of hate has no place in the GTA or Canada. Let's hope those criminals responsible are brought to justice quickly. Then, we go to another member of parliament, a three-time member of parliament now from Nepean, Mr. Chandra Arya. Chandra Arya said, vandalism of Toronto BAPS Sri Swaminarayan Mandir by Canadian Khalistani elements, extremists, should be condemned by all. This is not just an isolated event. Canadian Hindu temples have been targeted in the recent past by these kinds of hate crime. Hindu Canadians are legitimately concerned. Chandra Arya is a member of the Liberal Party of Canada. And then you had Shri Tim S. Uppal. Saddened to see the vandalism on BAPS Toronto Mandir in Toronto. All Canadians should be able to practice their faith without intimidation or fear. I look forward to visiting my friends at this mandir again soon. Now, I want to share my thoughts over here. First
Mhm.
of all, Patrick Brown has made this about I don't know what vandalism. Um, Very interestingly, Patrick Brown does not talk about the Khalistani word at all. Like the literal attack is Khalistan Zindabad written, blaring at your face. Nobody can avoid it, and Patrick Brown refuses to talk about it. Now Chandra does, and credit where it's due to Chandra Arya. So Chandra is a good man. Chandra Arya is a good man. And here's the problem. Chandra Arya belongs to a party which is run by, as I like to call him in a tongue-in-cheek way, Justinder. Justinder did not tweet about it, right? He did not tweet about it. There was not even a word spoken about this attack on a very iconic temple. Like for people who do not realize how iconic the BAPS Toronto is in terms of its value in the community, like there are other temples too. I'm not saying others are less other, but the BAPS Toronto is very famous. Like if you go to Toronto, it's one of the places you visit. Like BAPS is that famous. Or the Gaur Mandir, for people who don't know, the Gaur Mandir is also very well known in that area. People used to go there all the time. But BAPS Toronto is the very known spot, and it's always, the BAPS Toronto attack is just very regular, very common, very, very, very much in sync with what happens. But the one that fascinated me the most was obviously Pierre Poilievre, too, the Conservative Party leader. He also came out and he openly said thank you to Deputy Conservative leader Tim Uppal for standing with the Hindu community against this hateful vandalism. All Canadians must condemn this abuse and stand for the freedom of faith. Now, here's the point. I want to focus on Tim Uppal, though. I want to focus on that gentleman here. Now, and why, I'm going to tell you.
Mhm.
It's very interesting how, even the condemnation has a sleight of hand here. Now, full record, I know Jagmeet Singh has not uttered a word. I don't expect anything from Hugmeet. And these are my words. These are not Raginiji's words. I don't expect anything from Hugmeet. So I have never had any expectations from him. But Justin disappointed, as
Very
always.
disappointing.
Yeah,
Very
Justin
disappointing.
disappointed.
Shame on
And
Justin.
yeah, Justin disappoints. But, Tim Uppal, look, the photo over here is very interesting how Tim Uppal has shared it, right? He shares the shot of Murdabad. Like, Murdabad to what? What Murdabad? Now, if this is a regular Canadian, right, they may not be of Indian origin. They might be of any other origin. They look at this, okay, seems someone has spray painted a temple. And they
Mm.
can go on and move on from their life, but it's more than that. It's a lot more than that. And this is where the sleight of hand, as I say, comes. The sleight of hand is what bothers me the most when it comes to these issues, because when Tim Uppal shared this photo, the sharing of the Murdabad was by design, not by innocence. It is by design. And the reason is that they don't want to talk about, especially Tim Uppal cannot talk about the elephant in the room. And there is an elephant in this room, in the case that stares Tim Uppal right smack bang in his face. He doesn't want to talk about it, and that's Khalistan.
Yeah.
Now, Tim Uppal does not, the only person who used the word Khalistan in the tweet in this entire fiasco. is Chandra Arya. And credit where it's due to Chandraji. But the point is, Chandraji belongs to a party that did not even acknowledge this attack happened. So,
Exactly.
so imagine the plight of the Hindu. The Conservative Party is the first one to stand up for them. So kudos to Pierre, by the way. And let me be very clear and very open. And these are my views. These are not Ragini ji's views. So do not attribute what I say to Ragini ji. If it was
Uh-huh.
not for Pierre, I was not sure too. It may be because of Pierre, this pressure must have gone, and these things have happened. But the point is, I don't expect Pierre to understand this. Now, Tim Uppal, as a representative of the Indian community, not the Sikh community, Tim Uppal is an Indian too. He's of Indian origin. Tim Uppal should have stared the Khalistani problem at the face, but he conveniently sidelined the Khalistan angle, and he just spoke about some random Murdabad slogan written on the temple. And this is the problem.
Mhm.
In Canada, I have zero expectations from the NDP.
Oh,
Zero. I
no,
don't
no.
expect, until that man is the leader of the NDP, that man who is an absolute disgrace. And I don't need to do anything to prove that man wrong. Terry Milevsky, a veteran Canadian journalist, has
Yes.
done enough. With
Yes.
one interview, Terry exposed him. So I don't need to do anything or say anything. There have been articles written in the Vancouver Sun about how the Hindu community has been bullied by Khalistanis in Canada. Bullied. I think it was Douglas Todd, if I remember his name correctly. If I have gotten the name wrong, please correct me, guys. But I remember this article written um, on this specific issue where you know and I was surprised that that somebody is actually writing about this in the Vancouver Sun. And uh, and very interestingly, in the last 2 years, even Douglas Todd has become very silent on his criticism on uh, you know mm, on the Khalistan issue in the last 2.5 years. Very, very silent. This is not a sly on Douglas Todd. I admire Douglas for whatever work he's done for standing up for the community in general. But people need to remember that Kim Bolan, who was another journalist from the Vancouver Sun, she was sued by the Khalistanis. And since then, everybody's gone silent in the Vancouver Sun. I just want to state that on the record over
Mm.
here. So, the Hindu community is facing a lot. And why I wanted to talk about the BAPS issue in so much detail before I jump into what is going to be the meat of the discussion is that, do not, for once, when we talk about Hinduphobia in Canada, a lot of people will make it about, oh, this must be some random racist, white people going around. No, 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 no. These are our own people screwing us over. We may not like this reality, but Khalistanis are our own people. These are our own
Absolutely. Our own
flesh and
brothers
blood.
and sisters. Yes,
These are our own
absolutely.
people.
Yeah.
ये हमारे लोग हैं भाइयों, जो हमारे ही पीछे पड़ गए हैं. एंड अभी मतलब एंड आई आल्सो वांट टू टेक दिस अपॉर्चुनिटी टू कांग्रेचुलेट Canada on their biggest achievement on the 18th of this month, where they have finally gotten another opportunity for Khalistan in Canada, because India में तो होने नहीं वाला. तो ये जैसे आप ये देख रहे हो, ये इतनी लंबी लाइन खड़ी हुई है. सो ये ब्रैम्पटन में हुआ था, पीपल आर वोटिंग फॉर द खालिस्तान रेफरेंडम. सो आई कांग्रेचुलेट कैनेडा on giving them land. I think they finally might get something, because India से तो कुछ होने नहीं वाला इन लोगों का. So having said that, now Ragini ji, let's talk about the school system. What are the
Mhm.
problems faced by the Hindus in the school system?
Well, before we move on to this, I just want to mention Apne made some important points, and it's really important for us to move beyond this just describing what is happening, to have a sense of analysis, as to be we need to start thinking about where is this coming from, and why is it happening? Because from what I've read and I've seen, this is you mentioned about intimidation. The other leg of this issue is the incentives. So this is like we need to fight. I mean, I don't want to give you the answer because everybody knows it's been funded by a certain group. This is money coming in. So money and intimidation, very old tools that are used throughout the ages, are being used. Ordinary Sikh brothers and sisters and Punjabis are being bullied, like you said, and money is pouring into the coffers of the politicians to silence them. So both those tools are being used. And, I think you didn't mention, so I want to mention that Mr. Punni, or whatever his name is, from the Sikhs for Justice, has been allowed to come to Canada to supervise this whole thing. Can you imagine this man who is well known? I don't want to say too much because, for my own safety, but it's horrible to think that the Canadian government has allowed a well known organization that has talked about armed sort of some kind of attempts to intimidate people for their cause of Khalistan, right? So these are not just ordinary Sikhs who are organizing themselves, is the point I want to make. There's that concern about intimidation. And the funny thing I thought this morning was that, there was this, how many people have voted during this, we don't know the results yet. But my question to these people will be, what about the silent majority that didn't vote? Just look at their numbers, and then let's talk about, you people coerce certain number of people to out there. There's a lot of brainwashing going on. I'm on an interfaith sort of group that does presentations on interfaith, and I've met beautiful Sikh young people. There was one very lovely Sikh woman who did a presentation on Sikhism. She must be in her 20s. And she was wearing the traditional clothes with that head. And she spoke so beautifully, but you could see from her presentation, she knew nothing about the links between Hindu Dharma and Sikhism. We are under one, it's a panth of our Sanatan Dharma. And she knew nothing about that. She had been brainwashed. There's a new generation that has been brainwashed, and they're by this idea of cutting off all connection with Sanatan Dharma. And that is, the sad part is that when you cut a branch off the tree of Sanatan Dharma, that branch is going to die. And that's the sadness that I feel for the Sikh, the people who are following this, that by delinking from the tree of Sanatan Dharma, that feeds all that beauty comes from that root. And there's so many different paths, but they're all rooted in that beautiful ancient tradition. And she knew nothing about it. And I looked at her and I said, "You're so beautiful. I wish you had not been brainwashed." But this is happening to the new generation. And that's where the concern that I have is that these are new generation. They're not linked to India, and they don't know anything about our roots and about our gurus who gave their life for the Sanatan Dharma, right? So let's move on to
Yeah.
talk.
So what exactly happens in the school districts here in Canada?
Well, I can only speak about my own experience, and
Sure.
I have been involved in this traditionally it was called anti-racism area of work. And even before, I worked for Children's Aid, and I worked for, Toronto Housing and many other organizations. I was executive director of a organization that helped women. So, throughout we've focused on training on anti-racism. And so this idea that because you are brown and you're an immigrant, you are a target of racism is what I used to do when I was before that. So the turning point for me, in those days, I used to, for example, when I worked for Children's Aid, I was a chair of one of the branches of Hindu Anti-Racism Committee. But we were more focused on the Black community, the Indigenous community, because they're overrepresented in the child welfare system. So more children in care, uh, being removed from their homes, not doing well, um, systemically discriminated, institutional racism against those communities. That was my focus. Because I could see it, everybody could see it, and there's a huge amount of work being done on that. I wasn't as focused on Hinduphobia at the time, although in my work, I would come and see incidents where there was a lack of, in those days, I used to call it cultural competence. So a lack of understanding of our culture. So, for example, if a worker goes into a home of a Hindu family, or even it was a Pakistani family, a Muslim family, looking at anybody from Indian subcontinent. Please note, I do not use the word South Asian. So anybody from the Indian subcontinent, for example, I got a case where I was a family service worker at the time, where there was a concern about the mother not being attentive to her little boy. He was like 4, maybe he was 5 or 6, and to a small baby. And what I saw was that she would just sit in a chair and watch her kids play. In the Canadian context, it was expected that you'd be on the floor with blocks and you'd be playing, and uh, and they saw that as a problem. But when I went there, I didn't see that as a problem. And they said, "Oh, there's not enough food in the house." And I opened the cupboard. There was bag of rice. There's atta. There's dal. Fridge is empty. Who cares? Because she's making her roti and atta, and the kids look fine. So there was this preconception about, if you are a good parent, you'd be sitting on the floor playing with them and doing all that stuff. But she was content to just sit and watch them. The kids were thriving. The kids were great. They were running around and they were happy. So that is where I was coming from. I was not really focused on Hinduphobia. I was just looking at it as, oh, okay, they need to understand that the cultures are different. Kids sleep in our bed. It's not, it's not an incest issue if the kids are sleeping in the bed with the father. It's fine. That's what they do. So many issues about food and nutrition, and so I looked at it as cultural competency. But after I left Children's Aid, I did my PhD in 2016. There's a whole story. I finished my PhD in 2016 on yoga and all. During that time of my education, that's when the penny dropped, and I was able to connect what has happened to the indigenous people all across the world, including Canada, to our own experience as indigenous people. Because Hindus are indigenous people. We have had the same colonizing, the attempt of genocide, cultural genocide, physical, to wipe out our identity as Hindus, and basically, between the evangelicals and the Islamists, and the colonizers, them working together, they still work together in India and here, right? So that became, the penny dropped about the indigeneity. The issue is of us being non-Abrahamic religions, and the root of the hatred or mistrust, or let's put it, one of the things that I want to tell the public here is an education piece which is really valuable for me, is to understand that, and this is happening even today, a lot of people who are working in this field or trying to address Hinduphobia, they don't have a theoretical frame on where to have an understanding of where it's coming from. So that's really important. So one of the things I wanted to mention here was that in order to justify these acts, and the reason behind a lot of silence about it is because deep down in their DNA, there is a hatred for Hindu. It could be a mistrust, or just seeing us as savages, uncivilized. These people are just ignorant. And that is a platform that is used to keep us down, or to silence us, or to convert us into something else. So that how does that manifest in our day-to-day life is how that we experience it. So if you might go to work, you might be asked, um, like I was asked when I was here in 1979. I worked for the TD Bank and I was employed. People were asked, like, why do you wear the nose ring? I actually had to take it off. I was, they were after me. I used to have a beautiful nose ring that my grandmother's belonged to my grandmother's, and I actually ended up taking it off because I was so harassed by people commenting on wearing a nose ring. Now, of course, everybody wears it. It's a fashion statement, but in those days, it wasn't. And then asked, why do you, Hindus are asked, well, like, why do you, one woman asked me, why do you burn your dead? That's so cruel and, insensitive, or whatever word she used. But, why we have so many gods, why we do this. So there is that. Where does that come from? It's the deep down mistrust and hatred or misunderstanding. I would call it, actually, it's a misunderstanding. So that's why I focus on education. But from them, they have this ingrained in them. Like my children were told, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe in Jesus. And I imagine little children, even today, they go around their schoolyard playing, and somebody randomly comes up to you and say, you're going to go to hell because you don't believe in Jesus. This is happening today. The parents are telling us. So so it's really important to understand that there is this ingrained, and we know the history of Canada. Historically, Canada was a whites only country, right? So even though we were part of the Commonwealth, so-called, under the British Raj, we couldn't come here, another colony, because, of course, we were Hindu. In the 1800s, Hindus were turned away. We know the ship was sent back. So there is deep-seated misunderstanding, mistrust, hatred towards our faith. And that comes out in our policies, in our institutions, and police. I mean, there is this, we call it systematic racism, institutional racism. So even if you work for the police, you have to follow their laws, and their laws are racist. So our mandirs, you won't find them downtown. They're all on the outside, because when we apply for a mandir status, we will have to ask, where will they park? Where will they, they come up with these important issues to deny us having a temple downtown, because all the Christian temples are already here. So you see how systematically we are pushed to the fringes. Our temples cannot be in downtown where we can be part of the mainstream. We have to be in little warehouses. But if you want to have a temple downtown, even if you have the money, they're going to come up with all these hoops you have to jump through. Whereas all the churches that are there, you can park on the street, but that's not a problem. So you see, the institutional racism, the systemic racism is part of the culture. And it's the reason why Hindus were not allowed to come here until most people came in the 70s, right? They started to come in the 70s when they started to need labor, right? So the second generation, third generation now, children who are attending the schools, they had to put up with this institutional racism. So let me start with the first one. The first, I became engaged with the Toronto District School Board. I'm currently the co-chair of the committee for Hindu Heritage Month. In 2016, the government of Ontario declared November as Hindu Heritage Month. And soon after, we began to organize. There were many, many people who were responsible for, and they did a good job of that. So now, but look at this. We have Hindu Heritage Month in November, but we as a community haven't really organized ourselves to go and ask for a good chunk of money to support the education and celebration of Hindu Heritage Month in Ontario. So organized about that. And a lot of the money that has been accessed has been for the samosas and for chai and for little Bollywood, some dancing, very good programs. I don't want to decry them because, the community's done. But we're not organized. We haven't put our heads together to address the systemic issue. And that's why, I want to talk about, I did this presentation and a letter to the Justice Committee, Human Rights Committee, to recognize Hinduphobia. Because in the academia, we have no allies.
Mhm.
Academic Hinduphobia, there is, we can. There's no professor. There actually is maybe one or two, but they're working in engineering or finance. So there is no Hindu professor in the liberal arts that can champion a cause. Isn't that absolutely shameful? Where have we gone wrong? So, my Gurudev, Sri Ravi Shankar, always says, when you point a finger at someone, three are pointing towards us. So I think, Kushal, you always make that point that we can point fingers at others, but we really need to look at what we're doing. So that brings me to the work that I'm doing in the school board. So the Toronto District School Board, we've started this process of celebrating Hindu Heritage Month. I want to tell you about two very interesting things related to Hinduphobia.
Sure.
So one was on Sri Ram, and the other one is on our swastik. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to introduce the swastik. As you know, there's been a movement to declare swastika as a hate symbol, and there was a petition about that. And I think that Bill 229 or whatever, I think it's probably had a slow death or whatever because they didn't have support for it. But early on, I called the trustee and I said, "Listen, how do we get the swastik into our schools to claim it as our sacred symbol?" And we thought, in the traditional Hindu way, we don't like to be in people's faces, and
Mhm.
we like to do it in a peaceful way, communication and explanation and education. So that's the route we have taken. Um, so last year we put together a toolkit. We have Hindu Heritage Month, during which we do. There's a committee made up of teachers and educators. They have a senior management representative, and there's community people like me and so many others. And we plan the events. One of the things we did last year was to prepare a toolkit. It's a physical box, like a banker's box, and it has items in it like diyas, puja thali, musical instruments. And then we wrote a book to accompany that to explain what's in it, right? So Sri Yantra is there. So beautiful things. We have a thing on the bindi as feminine energy as Shakti. So we were working on that, and in the puja kit we had the diya and all of that, and I put the swastik in there, a photo of I hand drew the Sanskrit in red and with the four dots, and I submitted that document as part of the document, submitted that. Of course, we got a pushback, and they said, no, 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 we can't put the swastik in this toolkit in your booklet because this is problematic. Some community will be offended. And I sent them the information that Kohna has a beautiful package on explaining it, and we sent it, and they accepted it. So this year in November, this toolkit will go out, a physical box, and it has the swastik, an explanation, but it doesn't go into the politics of it. It's like 3 lines. Swastik is a symbol for well-being. So we have the swastik out in a very non-controversial manner because this is the way, an educative way. We don't want to be in anybody's face. We want to do our education in a calm, peaceful way. So that's it. The other issue was more open discussion was about Sri Ram. Last year, we chose our theme. Every year, we have to choose a theme. This year, our theme is Bhumi Devi, our sacred Mother Earth. Last year, we chose the year before, we had tried to choose this theme of Sri Ram, but we didn't get it through. But last year we got it through, Sri Ram. And we wanted to have our tagline as Jai Sri Ram, and you should have seen the response. Absolutely no. We had such bad feedback. The teacher, I don't know where it came from, but they said, oh, this is a slogan for politics and those who brought down the masjid, the Babri Masjid, and it's like a hate speech. And we were like, wow, Jai Shri Ram is a hate speech?
Just one question here.
Yeah.
Do they not allow Allahu Akbar too?
I don't know if they allow it as a slogan in the thing. I mean, they say it all the time in their mosques and they greet each other, but we were told it's a good question, Kushal, but we were told Jai Shri Ram is a hate speech. Can you believe it? We were told, and you know what? We didn't want to fight it. We didn't want the committee and our work to be, how shall I say, um, sidelined in any way. You know, we didn't want any cloud over our work. So we agreed to not use Jai Shri Ram, but we had Shri Ram, an epitome of love, peace, and something like that. We had epitome of love and service. So we used that tagline instead of Jai Shri Ram. So, you know, the Hindu phobia is very real. And of course, we're continuing our work. And then we work with the Peel District School Board. There's a very good people working. You know, Sagita Iyer did a wonderful job working with Peel School Board, and you know, we provided them with material, and they were really doing nothing, and we had to start from scratch. The interesting story, of course, is with the Durham District School Board. There, we've had a huge pushback. So we had emails and things, a huge process with some parents, Durham District's parents. And we were told by two senior people of the district school board that there is no Hinduphobia. Right after three parents had described how the children were facing discrimination based on their tradition, you know, asking about you're going to go to hell or whatever. At first, there were some students trying to convert other students right in the classroom. You can become this if you say these words, and all kinds of comments about the bindi and all the other things, you know, how many gods and all of that. So we were giving examples of bullying in the classroom based on our culture. And this person told us point blank, he said, we have not received a single report of Hinduphobia. So, what we understood from that conversation was that if any Hindu parent went to the teacher or principal and said, my child is being bullied because of his, you know, Hindu tradition, anything, clothes, or whatever, they were said, oh, it's not children don't understand. They just, you know, they're just being rude. We don't have, you know, it was never labeled. So, what we've realized is that unless you label something, you're not at the table. You don't have a seat at the table. You know, there's so much discussion about, oh, don't use the word Hinduphobia, you know, whatever. Well, if we don't use it, first of all, we'll have no seat at the table. We'll have no opportunity to address it. So if you don't name something, how do you challenge it? How do you educate people? You know, how do you tell them that if that you know, swastika is not a hate symbol? How do you tell them if you talk of caste that you're just you know, it's a caste bomb? It's a way to shame Hindus. How do you tell them that, you know, um, the historical about the description of the deities, anything making fun of, you know, this recently we had this woman who showed Ma Kali as, you know, smoking and all that. You know, how do you protest about it? Oh, everything is allowed in Hinduism. You know, oh, so it's easy to dismiss everything that our concerns are, but we know other traditions, you can't say a word. But Hindus are fair game to say anything. So we need a seat at the table. If we don't call it out, we don't get to say anything. We don't get funding. We don't get to train about Hinduphobia. We have no say. I also mentioned, do you have any questions? I don't want to go on and on.
No, no, no. Please go on and on. It's all about you. It's not about me. I'll ask the
No,
questions. Don't worry
no.
about it.
I want
But
to
explain it.
I want to tell you a very, very important thing that has happened. I think we are all aware of what's happening in the US, you know, about the caste, how in California, caste is now something that has been added to the policy on discrimination. So it's been added as a term. And there's been a huge educational campaign by HAF and KONA and all that to say how problematic this is. how this is it basically is racism. It's actually Hinduphobia. Dropping. Can you imagine Hindu kids going to schools and being asked to name their caste? And the situation where a Hindu professor can be charged with discrimination by a student who's from a different caste to say, "Oh, you're this caste, and you gave me a low mark because of my caste." How? I mean, this is the situation we're in, that students are faced with, and there's a huge movement about not celebrating Holi and Diwali because these are all casteist Brahmins controlled events. So I mean, this is the kind of nonsense, and it's coming to Canada. Last 2 years, the Peel Children's Aid Society, please listen to
Mhm.
this. Children's Aid Society.
Just for context, Peel is one of the biggest districts in
That's right.
in
That's right.
in the state of Ontario.
Yeah, Peel Children's Aid Society for 2 years has had a Dalit Awareness Month. I saw that on the internet, and I contacted the person in charge there in the diversity and inclusion. It's a department that takes care of it and who hosted this event. And I saw a post on the internet, and the person who did that session, Professor Jangam, he is a well-known Hinduphobe. This is the man who prevented Professor Paranjape from making a speech or a presentation at Carleton because he was perceived to be speaking on behalf of Hindus, So this man has made a presentation, and we and the Hindu community here in Toronto heard his presentation at the Noor Cultural Center. This is an Islamic center where they have namaz, and on the top floor they have a community center. And so we had a huge protest. I probably sent like 20 emails imploring them that in your religious place, please don't have a Hinduphobic event. Have someone speak from the other side too. But they had professor from Monk and this Carleton professor and they spewed hatred against India and Hindus. This guy even went to the extent to say that Ramayan there's no such thing as even a Ramayan because there's so many versions of it, nobody knows which is it. There's a Dalit Ramayan. And so he was, to that extent, this is what he said at the
Would
Noor.
that person say if there were different translations of the Quran, there are different versions of the Quran too?
I'm not going to go there. You go there. But the point is that this person who is openly Hinduphobic, he was invited to present to the staff of Peel Children's Aid on Dalit awareness. You can just imagine the hatred. And then we asked this person, can you give us a transcript of what he said? Because it was on your website and it's gone. So I mean, it was public. I mean, we're taxpayers. And the Children's Aid Society is funded by Ontario taxes. We have a right to that information. We were said no. This year, even before April, in November, December, we were asking them, are you going to do this again? Who is coming? Can we make a presentation? Because our Dalit brothers and sisters, whatever's happened to them, we want that, there's no such thing happening here. We support the Dalit cause. So we're our brothers and sisters. Can we make a presentation to present the counter argument that Professor Jangam has, his anti-Brahmanic and all that hate that he spews? But we were said, no, they have a right to say what they have to. And this year they had Tenmoza, Tenmoza, her, she presented. And we asked again, can we have a transcript of what she presented? And they said, no, this is private. So we have to pursue this. We're pursuing this. And point blank told there is no Hinduphobia. So we asked them, do you have a Dalit staff? Do you have any Dalit clients? You've never done anything on Hinduphobia, yet you've done so much on, you've had these major events on, and they said, no, we have no Dalit staff, we have no Dalit clients. and they have a right to present. So I said, okay, you know, these people are position of power, and this is a challenge for us. There are people, the staff that are behind. I don't want to name them, but we know who's pulling the strings. There are people behind them who have positioned themselves as their right hand, third hand, whatever, and they're spewing this hatred. Can you just imagine? You work for this agency in protecting Hindu, all families. You go to a Hindu home with that mindset that Hindus are responsible. And like Rajiv Malhotra's new book has come out on snakes on the Ganga, and one of the chapters in is how problematic it is to conflate caste with race. And this is what these people do. They conflate race with caste. So in their presentations, what they say is, just like the blacks were made slaves, and they are being discriminated against, just like that, the Dalits. So this conflation is illogical. Our histories are completely different. Not to say that the Dalits issue is not to be addressed. Of course it has to be. But this way of ganging up and misrepresenting what has happened historically and what is the way of creating these alliances that are artificial. Hindus are the ones who have been persecuted for 1,000, 1,500 years. We are the ones, the indigenous people, who have had faced numerous genocides. But then we are this artificially placed. We are like against somehow that we're oppressing the blacks. So that kind of strategy is being used. So our effort is to work on many different levels. Like I said, not just school boards, but our effort is to do this educational campaign in all government institutions, including hospitals. And so I'm just a drop in the bucket, little tiny. Thank you for listening. I don't know if you have any questions.
Yeah, I
We have,
do. So
yeah,
I do have a few comments over here.
yeah.
So first of all, on the issue of caste, obviously my views on this are slightly different from the diaspora. I have always said that the diaspora way of dealing with the caste issue, in my view, in a wrong way. I think there is a lot of denialism in the diaspora on the caste issue.
Hmm.
Do I blame them for that? No, I don't blame them for that, because they just came here and their kids, who are second generation Hindus, literally have zero caste consciousness.
Yeah.
As someone who's married to a second generation person of Indian origin, I can vouch for that, that they don't understand caste at a conceptual level. But then it is fine up to there, but what happens after that is where my problem starts. And I've been very open about this. My views too. We've spoken offline about it, but I think it's very important that I put this on the record. I think what I find very interesting is, would the Noor Cultural Center allow me to make a presentation where I invite a Pashmanda Muslim representative and I talk about casteism in Islam in India? Would they allow me to do that?
No. It's a
Or
rhetorical question, of course.
what if I said the Noor Center to talk about Jat supremacy and how the Khalistan movement is all about the Jats?
Yeah.
There are other castes in Sikhism too. There are Ravidasyas, Ramgadiyas, and there is rampant casteism in Punjab in the Sikh community. There are separate gurdwaras. If people do not know, I have the entire list of gurdwaras based on caste in Ontario. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
have to, um, yep. So it's very interesting that casteism exists in every religion. What baffles me is that it has been made into this unique hydra monster, as if only the Hindus came up with this system, nobody else did. And even if somebody else practices this, it is the latent Hinduness inside their system. No, it's not the latent Hinduness inside the system. Hierarchies are universal.
Absolutely.
Human beings always had hierarchical systems. Post agricultural societies tend to have hierarchies. Now, my defense, this is not my defense. I am very clear that whether you want to call it jati varna, whether you want to call it caste, I have been very open about it. I want the annihilation of that system. I have said it many times on my podcast. I have
Mhm.
said it many times on other places where I've been interviewed. I hate this system. I have
Mm.
not even hidden it. I hate it and I want it annihilated. But at the same time, I will not let the Hindu community being made into this monster, which
Yeah,
they're not. It's the
yeah,
second generation Hindus don't even know what their caste is. They could care less about their caste. They're
exactly.
just in their life and their connection to India, or an average second generation or third generation Hindu that is raised in North America, their average interaction is maybe just their parents telling him Diwali, just go bow down to the idol, watching some Bollywood. I'm being very open here.
Yeah,
Watching some Bollywood, doing some dances, and dressing up in Indian clothes on traditional days. That's
yeah,
about it. that
absolutely.
that that the Hinduism is always maintained in these areas by the first generation Hindus, by and large. I'm not saying all second generations are like that. There are many people who are very, very devout Hindus, so please don't
Mhm.
get me wrong, but by and large Hinduism in North America is maintained by first generation Hindus, because
Yes.
80% of the Hindus in North America are first generation. They
Mhm.
come from India and they live there, and this ratio has been maintained pretty much at a 80-20 ratio. And what is interesting is that all these diversity, equity, inclusion, this is the famous word that is being used these days by
Yeah.
all and sundry: diversity,
Mhm.
equity, inclusion. But
Yep.
it's not really diversity of thought, it's just diversity of skin color. It's like people
Yeah.
who look different but think the same way.
Mm.
They all think the same way, and that's not really diversity in my opinion. But having said that, what I want to understand is, and this is where, I'm going to take the audience questions also, but I have one question. And I want to, now you'll be like, Kushal, tu itna gusse mein kyun aata hai community ke upar? But main aata hu. I mean, what the hell is the community doing? Kya I don't know how else to ask this. मतलब क्या झक मरा रही है community?
It's true. We are very terrible at it. We have done horribly. It's shame on us. This is, what to say. I mean, they are, I think the Hindu community is very well, how should I say, intentioned, but they're very focused on their day to day, making money, getting the children to university and things. And when their child comes home with a homework in on caste, they don't go to the school and complain. So all the kids are coming home with this. They're being taught in school when they take a class on religions of India. First thing they learn is the Hindus have the caste system and they have the whole thing, the triangle with the Brahmins on top and the outcasts, and they come in here. The Hindus have, and they don't question it. They don't say no, we don't have this as part of our religion. It's a social issue. It's not a religious issue. None of the our religious texts don't teach the caste. It was jati and varna. How it was conceived was different. It's a social issue, and issues of class and this is in all cultures, but they never talk about, like you said, none of the other uh, class systems and discrimination that is in all traditions is ever spoken of. Only the Hindu caste system is taught in the school. And that has been my concern. And this is that how come only Hindus are targeted? And it's like the Hinduphobia in the academia is over the roof. I mean, all they talk about is drop the caste bomb and make the Hindus feel dismal. This is the way to silence Hindus. And that's why a lot of our children, and this is something we explained to the school boards, is they said, oh, there's no issue of Hinduphobia. Hindu children excel in school. And they're not like the blacks or the indigenous people struggling in school and not going to universities. Your kids do well. So what's this Hindu phobia? I mean, they shake their head. And I said, no, the point is that even despite despite the Hindu phobia, they have the huge parental support and a community tradition of upholding education as a very important aspect of of life, and that's why they're doing well, because that's the focus of the Indian parents, and they couldn't understand this. And I gave them the example, for Hindu Heritage Month, every year one year we made a significant effort to contact people, see if we could have like a booklet on important Hindus in science, in math, and everything, in STEM and other areas. Do you know, I contacted some really amazing people who were mathematicians and young people. And did you know what they said? No, no, no. We can't be on a list of Hindus. So this internalized inferiority complex or hatred for your own tradition, that or that knowing that if you call yourself a Hindu, you will be discriminated against. They know that. So this is a deep, deep shame that's been instilled in our kids in school, that they don't want to be. There is no Hindu organization for doctors. There's a Hindu school councils starting now, but there is a huge fear among Hindu students that if we assert our Hinduness, we will be discriminated or seen as casteist, or that we discriminate against other. This is the burden that our students, they should be proud. The Hindu civilization has given so much to the whole world from every field. The whole of the Western civilization is currently resting on the shoulders of Hindu civilization. I have to explain that because I think it's a very huge statement to make. This is something I learned in school when I was doing my PhD. There's a very famous writer, a Jewish writer. Her name was Hannah Arendt. She's very famous, and there's others in her school of thought. And what happened was that after World War II, there was a huge gap or void in the Western civilization. Hannah Arendt talks about the death of tradition in the West after the Second World War. They looked at themselves and they thought, we have achieved so much, but then we did this. Our common person on the street, instead of protecting their brothers and sisters who were Jewish, who were their neighbors, who they sat down and had lunch and celebrated birthdays, that they turned them over to the Gestapo. What kind of tradition is this? And there was a huge soul searching. And that's when they discovered the Hindu idea that the Atma is not the body and not the mind, that there's something such as a witness. And, in the yoga tradition, there's a whole school of Indology started by people who studied yoga. And this is what they realized, is that there is a separation between the Atma and the body and the mind. And that there's a witness. So that was a huge, and that's when, all this area of research started on mindfulness, on, famous people began to talk about understanding the layers of existence. And, I can, all kinds of names, but that's not important. The point is that this whole idea of spirituality doesn't exist in the Abrahamic religions. There's no such thing as spirituality. Spirituality comes, but everybody now is talking about spirituality. Spirit, the idea of spirit as distinct from the body and mind, is as a Hindu idea. It's a huge gift to the world. And many other fields, of course, we know, in science, medicine, Ayurveda, yoga, everything is there. But this is, so what they have faced is the loss of tradition. And what they're trying to do now to Hindu tradition, and Raji Malhotra talks about, is to kill our tradition. This is what they're attacking. They want to use caste and all this, the things that are the negatives, to kill this beautiful tradition and to make us feel shame. So the Hindus have maintained, despite 1,000 years of colonial rule and Islamic whatever, we have maintained that tradition of spirituality. Spirituality is not the right word. It's Adhyatmic Vidya. you know, and it's not, it's a Sanskrit non-translatable, but in order to communicate, sometimes we have to use these words, right? So this is the huge wealth. You know, how many people in the world today are meditating? You know, this whole thing about mindfulness is a sham. You know, mindfulness takes you to the door, you know, just becoming aware of your body, mind. I mean, that just takes you to the doorstep of meditation. But it's good that it's happening and people are being aware. I want to give you a really interesting understanding. We were doing this a program on from Data Living. We have a program for students, for young kids in a school. And we face a huge pushback because, again, the negativity that's been attached to Hinduism, there's Hinduphobia. Because of Hinduphobia, we've had a tough time bringing yoga and meditation into schools. They're okay with letting mindfulness, which is like a very poor photocopy, of what we offer, but they're welcome. But authentic yoga and meditation is being blocked, you know, because of course if the mind is empty, devils could come in. I mean, this kind of weird thinking. I remember we were doing this program in one of the schools. It was a pilot. It didn't go very far because of Hinduphobia. And there was a very Christian Orthodox parent who didn't give permission for her daughter to do the meditation part because she said, you know, they believe that an empty mind can be taken over by Satan. So, you know, if you meditate, your mind is empty, it could get taken over. So she said no. But what the funny part was that her daughter loved it. She just loved it. Little hints of it that happened. And then what we did was we invited the parents to come in and gave them an intro talk as to what is, you know, pranayam and meditation and, you know, bhastrika, and how, you know, just being silent for a little while helps the calm down and become aware of your body, emotions, sensations. And the woman looked at her and said, wow, this is beautiful. Please do teach my daughter this. You know, so her daughter was able to participate in learning. But, you know, on an institutional systemic level, we are being blocked. We are being blocked. Mindfulness can come in, yoga can come in. In California, you cannot use, you have to call it crisscross applesauce. If you sit in Padmasan, it's called crisscross applesauce. The, you know, the California uh, bo- um, judgment was that you cannot use the Sanskrit words, you cannot use om. So this is what we face. We face digestion, as Rajivji's call it. You know, they want all the wealth of Hindu dharma, all our beauty and things, and put a different name on it and make it part of Western universalism. That, oh, we don't need yoga, we don't need everything. We already have it as part of our own. We have mindfulness, we have whatever. The latest tradition is to delink yoga and meditation from its roots and make it as some their own discovery, right? So this is what's happening.
Yeah, but honestly, I think that this is my opinion, and I mean I understand where Rajiji comes from. I think it's not just Hinduphobia; it's just the general discomfort with paganism inside the Abrahamic discourse, and they think Hindus are pagan, and they're the only good pagan is a dead pagan. I'd like to say that, and they're just very uncomfortable with an alive pagan. That I mean that's it,
Well,
it, it, it is what it is.
well,
I mean, but it's I think the
well,
onus is
but
on the community to educate them, not the other way around.
well, you know, we can educate as much as you can, but the leadership of you know, for example, the Pope is on record. I have it in my dissertation, a quote from the Pope. You know, the Pope said, "You can do as much yoga as you want, but until you believe in Jesus, you're going to go to hell." I mean, he said that you know, so, you know, institutionally there is no support, and like I've told to you, it's internalized. The message that this kind of practice is problematic has been internalized. So there is Hinduphobia, racism, whatever you want to call it. You know, I don't want to get caught, but Hinduphobia is a proper word. I think we should use it. I want to mention this issue. Recently, I was listening to a talk 2-3 days ago by some international group. With this Roopnath ji was there, Pandit ji Roopnath ji, and Jay ji Bansal from from the US, from and they were actually complaining. They actually got together with international representative of other faiths to denounce the use of the word Hinduphobia, and they claim that it's not Hinduphobia. JG wants to use another term, Hindumesia or Hindudvesha, and this is where diversity of thinking has become a problem for us, because guess what? We can't even agree to a term. How are we going to address it as a community? This
Yeah, but that's
issue,
fine. I mean, I think it's not like, everybody agrees with the term Islamophobia, in my opinion,
but it's
inside the
look,
Muslim
we
community.
may not agree with it, but institutionally, they are getting so much money and voice and seat at the table because they have one term that they've agreed to use. You may disagree, but we have to use something. We can't go to suppose I have to go to the Standing Committee on Human Rights and Justice and make a presentation. So we have to give it a title, right? So am I going to say, a presentation on Hinduphobia, aka anti-Hindu sentiment, aka Hindu Misia or Hindu Dvesha, aka, I mean, come on. Can we just agree to one term so that we can continue with the real work, which is on the education of it? It's just, it's a waste of time to argue about the term. I think we need to put our heads together and how we're going to address it at the root, educate people. But I think that's only one point. I really want to make this very important point here before maybe you close the program. I want to say each and every Hindu can do something on this by in their own life. I've met recently, I don't know where I was, there was something, and he was talking how he felt very comfortable with Hindus because he has Hindu friends, and that interaction that we can have in our daily lives. So Hindu parents going into their schools before Diwali and saying, can we set up a table or a display for a Diwali? Can we do a Saraswati Puja? You can go to your classroom and tell a story about Diwali. So each one of us, you can talk about it in your school. Everybody has inclusion and equity departments at their workplace. Go and make a presentation. Share some information. So I think this waiting for someone to do it or top down is I think for Hindu community is limited as far as I can see, because we're not organized. We don't have the funding. There's not a single organization that, I mean, I've just started an organization. I want to introduce it. It's called COHI, Canadian Organization for Hindu Heritage Education. We just launched it, and please send us your blessings. And we're going to be focused on education, but that's still working with boards, police, all kinds of government institutions. We want to do the top down. But the real effect that can happen is for Hindus to learn and speak up. When something anti-Hindu is said, please speak up. And there's resources, we can find them on our website, and so many other people are doing this wonderful job. But we need parents to go into school this Hindu Heritage Month and say, hey, I'm a Hindu. Can I tell a story? Can I show you something about my tradition? Can I decorate the bulletin board? Can I put some diyas? Give a little present to the principal with a diya and say Happy Diwali. So that's where I think the grassroots is most powerful. If we can not feel ashamed, if anybody says caste, just be able to say, no, that's not part of our religion. It's a social issue, and this kind of discrimination happens in all traditions. Let's not join it with Hinduism. So we need to know how to speak. So I really hope that people who are listening, who are Canadians, who will take a concrete step in education, towards education, and lovingly, Hindus, we are, our traditions of seeing the guest as God. I mean, these are beautiful things, and we practice it daily, but we don't label it as Hindus. We should, Atiti Devo Bhava. We should start using these terms. And, so I encourage all the Hindus who are listening to go out there and spread the, like Rajivji says, our good news is that we were born divine. We don't need a savior. That's if somebody comes to your door, tell them, no, 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 don't worry. We're born divine. We don't need a savior. We have a direct connection. So we got to have
or,
humor. We got to learn how to speak and speak
or,
up.
or or to use the late great Christopher Hitchens lines that the
What?
Christian heaven sounds a lot like celestial North Korea.
Oh no.
So, all right. So, there were a few questions. I think you've answered this question. Somebody had asked, "What is the long-term strategic objective?" This is common throughout the English-speaking countries. This person is from Ireland. What are the proposed short and long-term solutions proposals? I think Ragini ji has already answered that. This is more of a comment from a real patriotic Sikh who has said that it disheartens me as an Indian Sikh living in New York City what these seditionists have been doing or are doing. What patriotic Sikhs like us can do to curb the Khalistani narrative? Well, stand up for your own Sikhi, first of all. Stand up for your own Sikhi and stop patronizing gurdwaras that indulge in all these things. If you have gurdwara committee meetings and committee voting patterns, vote against the Khalistanis. It's very simple. But I know it's harder being a Sikh, and I think the Hindu community has to be very sympathetic to the Khalistani
Absolutely.
problem,
Mhm.
because let me tell you, if you are a Sikh who is like this person who has asked this question, you're going to be bullied by the Sikh, the Khalistani element inside the community itself. And I think the Hindus need to be more sympathetic to that. And I don't understand this question, like what turned you away from anti-racism? So before we wrap everything up, are there any last words you want to say? Anything else you want to add?
Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. This is who we are. I
Uh,
just want to remind people, look, we are peace loving people. And I think we just attended the Gita Utsav here. And I think Hindus need to be reminded that, Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu does not mean that you get trampled under people's feet. I think that we're so focused on our positive messages, but we forget that Hindus have survived for 1,000 years. I keep hearing people say that Hindus have survived all this and will go on and on. Pandit Rupnath was saying, "Oh, Hindus have survived 1,000 years. It's not threatened. Nothing's going to happen." It's that's not. Hindus have survived because people have fought. People have fought, and they have given their lives. So we have, I mean, nobody's saying fight to give your life, but the point is this idea that this, oh, we'll survive is not enough. We need to stand up for dharma, protect dharma, speak up for dharma, right? So we need that seva and that willingness to serve dharma as well. So of course, meditate. Everybody should meditate and do their spiritual, sadhana. Definitely with that we will have more strength to do our work for dharma. I think this it's a two-way street. I think it's very important for all the Hindus to be connected to their dharma, not to read and to practice do your sadhana, your pranayam, your meditations. And that's the true essence of our tradition. I wanted to plug that in. Is also learn to meditate. It's very important. Okay, namaste. And join Kohi in our efforts. Thank you very much,
All
Kushal,
right,
for
guys.
having me.
So before we wrap it up, once again, I'm gonna leave a few comments. I normally don't do it, but today I'm gonna do it. So here's the thing. Uh, I personally have actually had disagreements with the usage of many terms. Many times I've said things that, why do we need to use term X or term Y or term Z? But I still, at the end of the day, try to support this cause, and I try to support different initiatives taken by the Hindu community all the time, for the simple reason, because while we may argue on the terminology, I think what matters the most is, how do I say this? What's happening on the ground. The reality doesn't change no matter what you say. And there are many organizations that are doing good work on this, whether it's the Hindu American Foundation, whether it's the Coalition of Hindus of North America, where it's the organization that Ragini ji is working on. And you can uh, you can contact her and get more information about it too. Why I do this is because at the end of the day, I still believe, and these are my views, these are not Ragini ji's views, that I'm a political Hindu first and everything else later. And my political Hinduism teaches me to not spend my time on the narcissism of small differences, as Sigmund Freud would like to call it, where I quabble about a thing here or a thing there, but I look at the larger picture. And I do, when I look at the larger picture, I don't care if I agree with the term Hinduphobia or not. I'll still work with it. I don't care if I agree with the defense of caste at times within the diaspora. I don't, and I'm never going to hide from that. But that doesn't change the fact that the Swaminarayan Mandir was attacked. That doesn't change the fact that, as they say, the political system in these Western countries are very, very, in a very weird way, designed to be anti-Hindu. They don't understand us. Now, the problem is two-way. We have not educated them. Secondly, that ones who speak, many of them don't understand the language of discourse. Now, it's good that Ragini ji does. She mentioned Rajiv Malhotra, he does. And there are many others, members of the Hindu American Foundation, members of Kona. They understand the language of discourse. And the language of discourse is how to speak with the person when you're living in that land. Like in India, aap kuch bhi kar lo, right? वो आपका land hai. Maybe those people understand your language, but when you are living in Canada, you don't expect them to understand your language. You have to explain it to them in their language. And shouting and screaming and doing all kinds of weird things are not going to help the community at all. Also, if you feel that you want to help these causes, it's very important for you as Hindus. Like, I was shocked when Ragini ji was sharing many stories to me offline. Obviously, we can't cover everything. But when it comes to things like Hindu Heritage Month in Canada, even the Hindu teachers do not like take any notice of it. They themselves are not active. I'll give you another example. The BAPS attack happened, right? Okay, Justin Trudeau didn't say anything. Jagmeet didn't say anything. You know who did not say anything? Anita Anand did not say anything. You know who Anita Anand is? She's the defense minister in Canada. She is a Hindu. She didn't say anything. Now, if your own defense minister of your own country where you're living, who happens to be a Hindu, doesn't say anything, you need to ask yourselves the question that what is wrong with the community internally? The community has a deep tamasic mindset. And it's the result of, I don't know, whatever. Look, it's good that the Hindu community invested in, you know, math and science, and they actually got educated and they made a lot of money. But you have to have a larger understanding of the cause. And I don't know what to do. But what I'll say is, once again, I'll leave you guys with this thought. Think about the larger issue. Go and follow Ragini ji on social media. I've left her Twitter handle in the description of the podcast. You can go and connect with her. She can guide you if you're a Canadian Hindu. She can guide you about what's happening in Canada. You can also contact many other organizations, but I would encourage you to follow her. She's academic. She's an academic. She's got a PhD. She's written a lot of interesting material on these subjects, and you should go and follow her. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to go on doing what I do, which is talk about issues, raise valid concerns. And these are valid concerns. Hindu hatred is real. I completely recognize that. I may disagree on the degree or what, but it doesn't matter. You should talk about it. If you can talk about Islamophobia, you can talk about Hinduphobia, and I'm going to talk about it. So, once again, thank you to everybody for watching this today. Support the Cārvāka podcast. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave your comments over there. Become a member on YouTube or on Patreon, or buy the merch. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, namaste. Take care. Bye bye.